Chantel Smith. I'm the coordinator for recruitment and programming in the Honors College. Tonight we'll be going over design, cultures, and creativity. Joining me tonight, we have Interim Director of DCC, Dr. Jessica Liu. We also have Interim Associate Director, Dr. Sky de St. Felix. Thank you guys for joining us. We're also joined by a few of our wonderful honors ambassadors, who are going to be able to answer your questions. This presentation will be a brief presentation, then we'll open it up for Q&A. Please remember to keep yourself on mute throughout the duration of the chat, unless otherwise instructed. This is being recorded, so if you need to go back to review, it'll be on our website by early next week. So without further ado, I will go ahead and pass over the mic.
Thank you, Chantel. Hi, everyone. As Chantel said, my name is Dr. Liu. I'm the Interim Director of DCC, and I'm really excited to spend a little time with you this evening, hopefully help you make some informed choices as you're filling out your preferencing forms for the Honors College next year at University of Maryland. So before we continue, I do want to give a chance to, for the other DCC folks in the room here to introduce themselves so you can see them on your screen or at least hear their voice. So I'm going to allow Dr. Sky to go ahead and introduce herself, and then our 3 DCC students as well. So Dr. Sky, why don't you start us off?
Sure. Hi. Yes, I'm Dr. Sky. I am the Interim Associate Director for the DCC program this year, working alongside Dr. Liu. I go by she, her pronouns, and I'm new to the department, but have been very excited to be a part of it. I teach a couple of classes here, mostly working with the sophomores on their capstone projects. I help them with the proposal in the fall, and then they're working on the actual execution of the project here in the spring. And I also teach a freshman class called Diversity and Design Thinking. That's been really exciting to get off the ground as well. So yeah, welcome. Thank you all for being here.
Thank you so much, Dr. Sky. And then we'll move on to our 3 DCC students who are in the room. I'm going to start with Christina because she's our senior. She's about to finish up undergraduate here in just a couple months. Christina, will you tell us just a little bit about yourself and your majors as well?
Yeah, hi guys. My name is Christina. Like Jessica said, I'm a senior right now. I'm majoring in psychology and information sciences, and I'm also minoring in neuroscience and disability studies. So there's a lot going on here. My pronouns are she, her, and yeah, I was part of the Kappa class of DCC.
Great. Thank you so much. I'm going to keep going down kind of in order of class standing here. So Georgia, will you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Absolutely. Hello, everyone. My name is Georgia. I am a sophomore bioengineering student, and being a sophomore, I'm in the whole process of working on my DCC capstone, and then my pronouns are she, her.
Awesome. Thank you, Georgia. Then I have 2 first-year students with us today. We'll start with Bia because she showed up first on my screen. Bia, will you give a quick intro?
Hi, I'm Bia. I use she, her pronouns. I'm a freshman and I'm a biology and dance double major.
Awesome. Thanks, Bia. And Kausalya, you're our last one tonight. Go ahead and give us your intro.
Hi guys, I'm Kausalya and I'm a freshman and I use she, her pronouns, and I'm majoring in public health science on the pre-dental track.
Great. Thank you so much. I want to thank all our DC students and alums to be here to help us make sure we are sharing really good information about DCC to help you all make these decisions. So you'll hear more from these folks later when we get to Q&A. But for a little bit, I'm going to talk. So I'll finish up my intro as well. So I am the interim director of DCC this year, but I've been with DCC since 2019. And I've been teaching at the University of Maryland since 2011. So I've been around Maryland students for a very long time. And it's really been my pleasure to work with DCC for the past few years. And my pronouns are she, hers. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and start sharing my screen with you so I can tell you a little bit more about DCC to give you a baseline, and then hopefully you'll be able to ask some good questions. Okay, so DCC is, in terms of distinguishing ourselves from some of the other programs you might have already heard about or researched online in the Honors College, we like to think of ourselves as kind of the place in the Honors College and more broadly at the University of Maryland where the creatives are. Okay, so we are the haven for creatives, for makers, artists, tinkerers, builders, people who want to innovate and create things in the world, right? And that's not to say that there are not other creative folks, other innovation kind of work happening in the other living learning programs. But DCC is typically the place where you might find yourself landing if you are someone who simply cannot pick a major to save your life because you'd like to major in like 4, 5, maybe even 6 different things. In addition to maybe having a strong aptitude for science, you love fine arts, right? Or you know that you've always wanted to be an engineer, but at the same time, you're really interested in learning more about culture. You're interested in fashion. You do a lot of photography in your spare time. And maybe you're looking for a place on campus where you can be around other folks who are of these multi-track kind of minds, or you're looking for a place to be continually inspired and pushed to keep developing your creative crafts and your creative practices as not just like a side hobby, but an integral part of your life and maybe even an integral part of your professional work later on. So one of the things that I do want to make very clear is DCC takes creativity extremely seriously. We don't see it as necessarily part of just like your extracurriculars or your hobbies or something you do for fun, even if it is really fun and pleasurable and rewarding for you. We feel like creativity is a force in the world. And without creativity, the world would not experience progress. It would not be pushed forward to change. We would not have innovation. We wouldn't even ever feel like this sense of being at the dawn of a new day. We believe that creatives are the ones who actually push our world forward because they're able to look at the world as it currently is and imagine it better. And they have the skill sets and the drive to actually pursue that, to make it real. Okay. So if this starts to sound like you, hopefully DCC might be a place that you find yourself next year. Okay, so it might be helpful for me then to share a little bit more about the actual structure of the program, because first and foremost, DCC is an intellectual program, okay, which means that it is set up with a very specific curriculum, and being part of DCC means that you're going to take a certain sequence of courses throughout 2 years. So compared to some other LLPs that are longer in length, DCC is a 2-year program. So you're typically with us your freshman year, your sophomore year, and then after that, you finish your DCC work and you're free in your junior and senior year to pursue other things. Okay, so what you're seeing on your screen right now is the progression of the DCC curriculum to give you just kind of a heads up of what you might be experiencing here. In year 1, when you come in as a first-year Maryland student in the Honors College in DCC, you would spend your fall semester with all the other DCC students in your cohort. So typically DCC brings in about 65 to 70 students per year. And in that fall semester, you're with all of those other students. It's the largest class you'll ever take in DCC, but it's our opportunity to put you all together so that you get to know one another and you get your introduction to DCC. So this is kind of the equivalent of like a more gen ed style survey course where we take you kind of on a whirlwind tour of a lot of different concepts related to design, culture, and creativity. So you get a sense for what it means to start thinking with design at the forefront of your mind, or what happens when you already consider yourself a designer and you have to start thinking about culture at the forefront of your mind. Or maybe you already are very confident about who you are as a creative or what it means to develop a creative practice. How do you incorporate fundamentals of design into that, or thinking critically about human culture or history into that? So that's a 3-credit class. Again, all the students in the first year cohort take it together, and it satisfies 3 different gen eds at the university, which is really helpful because you can kind of fit it into your schedule in a way that satisfies some of the requirements of your major and your overall 4-year plan. After your first semester, those 65 to 70 students start to break out into their smaller DCC classes. So this is what our first year students are in right now. It's the spring semester. So they've gone from a big class of 65 students with me to much smaller classes in our HDCC 106 option. So for 106, this year, we have 5 different classes that you can take to satisfy this 106 course. They're very different. Okay, we bring in faculty from all across the university to teach these classes. So sometimes that's a big reward for y'all in DCC. You get to take classes with faculty from a lot of different departments and majors, even though you only have maybe 1 major or 2 major. And you start to get to do that with the 106 course. Dr. Sky is teaching one of these. She mentioned earlier, diversity and design thinking. We have a communication professor who's teaching a class called Digitality and Its Discontents. We have a CS professor teaching a class about computer music abstraction. Okay. And we also have professors from the School of Information Science who are teaching about Indigenous knowledges, Indigenous collection. Okay. So there's a lot of different classes you would take once you move into your second semester of your first year. That's also 3 credits. And you can see on the screen as well that it satisfies some gen ed requirements. Okay. Actually, I made an error there. Those are not the right gen eds. Those are the ones from 105, but the HDCC 106 satisfies the humanities gen ed requirement. Okay. In year 2 of your fall semester, that is when you start thinking a little more intensely about your capstone, which is how students traditionally end their DCC time. So in the fall, you take a 1-credit class where you develop a proposal for a project. You think about everything from the history of the project, the audience that you believe that's meant for, could impact. You think about the budget, you come up with the timeline, right? And a real plan to execute your ideas. In addition to that, in fall semester, you take a 3-credit course that's another seminar, but the difference between this one, 208 and 106 from your first year is that this one is much more hands-on. Okay, so the 208 classes satisfy a gen ed called scholarship and practice, because most of your work in 208 is hands-on skills training. You're learning real methods for doing research or doing creative work. And so you spend a lot of time actually making things, creating things, rather than learning more about deeper concepts or theories or histories. And finally, to round out year 2 in the spring, you take capstone 209, it's 3 credits, and that's when you have 3 credits all to yourself to do whatever it is that you want. Any project you can dream up, as long as you can execute it in 1 semester, we support you in doing it. DCC offers competitive seed grants to select students with really strong proposals and really strong project ideas to provide financial support so that you can make your project a reality. And at the end of year 2 and at the end of 209, all the DCC second year students present their project at our annual capstone fair, usually on the last day of classes of the spring semester. The last piece of the DCC curriculum comes from 3 credits that you have lots of different options to be able to fill. You can do an independent study in DCC. You can study abroad somewhere in a study abroad program in the university. You can sign up for an internship course at the university, or you can take a 300 or 400 level advanced course that you can somehow relate back to or is relevant to concepts in design, culture, and creativity. Okay, so this is a 16-credit curriculum. It might be a little overwhelming when you see it on the screen, but hopefully you'll notice that at most you're taking 2 DCC classes at a time. And the only time that happens is when one of them is only 1 credit, right? And so maybe some of our DCC students will talk more about this later. It typically is not difficult to incorporate it into your overall 4-year plan or your overall graduation requirements, regardless of what your major is. Okay, so I'm happy to take more questions about this later, but I do want to linger a little bit here on this notion of capstone, because one thing you might not immediately have been able to tell from the previous slide is DCC is designed in this way because each semester builds on the previous one to prepare you for this capstone experience. Some students leaving high school are really eager about this possibility of having kind of freedom and autonomy to develop your own independent creativity, your own kind of research impulses and skills, and take on a project fully your own and kind of see it through to the very end. We think it's really great that DCC students have this opportunity so early on in their college careers. A lot of other universities, colleges, and programs don't offer a capstone experience until senior year. Whereas you all get to head into junior year, senior year, you get to go on internships and interviews, already having this as part of your portfolio. And you'll find that many DCC students approach capstone as a way to prepare something that they'll be able to later take on the job market. Other DCC students approach capstone as a chance to take on a passion project, a personal thing, or develop a skill or craft that they've always wanted to have the time to do. And they use 3 credits to basically force them to carve out and protect that time so they can really learn something that they haven't had the chance or opportunity to learn before. Okay, so I'm happy to take more questions about capstone as well later. And again, some of our DCC students might talk a little bit more about this. And the other thing I want to touch on, right, DCC is an intellectual community, it's an intellectual curriculum, but it's also just a community of human beings. because it's a living learning program, so much of our job as DCC's leaders, right, and so much of the experience for our students is the fact that it's a chance for you to be in a group of people that you might share a lot in common with, but at the same time might have a lot of differences with. And something really cool and interesting happens when that is the case. So I wanted to talk a little bit more about DCC's community. All right. First things first, it is a really rich entry point for a lot of students into an otherwise massive university. So I went to a small undergraduate college for university. I went to Villanova University outside of Philadelphia. Some of you might have heard of it from NCAA basketball, or if you are from the East Coast or Pennsylvania, you might have heard of Villanova. Villanova is very small compared to Maryland. And when I came to Maryland, I was absolutely shocked at how huge it is, how long it takes to walk to classes, right? And just how many students are here. Depending on your personality, that might be so exciting. And for some of you, that might be really overwhelming. For a lot of folks, they're somewhere in the middle. And a program like DCC that typically only brings in 65 students per year gives you a small, tight-knit community to first kind of immerse yourselves in as a stepping stone into a huge campus, right? For a lot of us, if you don't show up to college or university with a bunch of best friends already, right, from high school who also chose to go to Maryland, you might step on campus not knowing anybody, and it can be really scary, right? DCC for a lot of people really helps ease that transition because it's a small living learning program. You get to know each other very well. Most of our students live in Prince Frederick Hall together on the same 2 floors. And so you're seeing these folks in class, in the hallways, you're having meals together, you're going to events together, you might be popping down to DCC's maker spaces together. And whether or not you find your best friends in DCC, it's a nice way to ease into some of the social challenges of going to a big university like the University of Maryland. Okay. So that's one thing I do want to make very clear. That's part of something we enjoy about DCC kind of being a smaller program is that you get this kind of liberal arts college experience while also having the benefits of being a huge research institution like the University of Maryland. Okay. The second thing I'll say is that the DCC community offers a nice breath of fresh air. And what I mean by that is DCC works really hard in both the curriculum and in the events to give our students lots of opportunities to let their creative selves back out. You're honors college students, you're very high achieving, you're incredibly intelligent, you work really hard. And when you get to college, many of you are just going to throw yourselves into lots of tough classes, a lot of activities, a lot of extracurriculars, leadership opportunities, all of it. And you're going to need someone to remind you over and over again that other parts of yourself need to be nourished, need to be cared for, need to be tended to. And so when we plan events for you, or we offer things like yoga, right? Or workshops that teach you how to preserve flowers, right? It's to remind you to get back in touch with other parts of yourself, the creative parts, some of the more gentle parts, the parts that are interested in experimentation, not just performing well on an exam, right? And we like to give you that escape from the other kinds of classes that you're taking, from the other kinds of thinking and work that you have to do. DCC really tries to protect other parts of yourself and make sure you're resting and staying nourished and that you're being cared for, right? And not that, so your college experience doesn't just become about work, work, work all the time, okay? In the bottom corner of the screen, you'll see a box that says mentorship. That is because DCC takes very seriously our role, not only as your teachers and your program leaders, but as your mentors. Dr. Sky and I offer student hours on a regular and weekly basis. And most of my student hours are filled with students who are just there to talk, catch me up on their lives, tell me what's going on, who they're dating now, what classes they're taking, what internships they're applying for. And it's not that they're coming to ask questions or get advice. It's just to have a connection and a mentor so that later on down the road, when it's time to apply for grad school or time to apply for an internship or that job you really want, you have 2 people, 2 faculty members, right, who know you not only as a student, but who know you as a human being. That's incredibly important. And like at the University of Maryland, depending on your major, you might never really know a professor like that. And a professor surely is not going to know you other than a name on their roster. And so we take it really seriously that DCC gives you a community that is not just about making friends, right? But actually forging professional connections with your faculty and mentors who know you from small classes and student hours and events. And if you serve on student council, stuff like that. So we can really speak to your strengths, right, when it's time to go to bat for you. And finally, in the bottom corner, you'll see the box that says belonging across boundaries. And we mean this intellectually, and we mean this socially and culturally. DCC takes very seriously that we're an interdisciplinary program. Students in DCC come from majors all across campus and colleges all across campus. So College of Arts and Humanities, right? The College of Architecture, College of Education, School of Public Health, right? School of Engineering, all of these schools are represented in DCC. And so we have students who are, like I said, they want to major in everything. They have so many different interests, and they're around other students who also have so many different interests. So we have students coming together, and the way they talk to one another and learn from one another is incredibly productive and really honestly changes who they are as human beings on this cusp of young adulthood. And they end up leaving DCC and University of Maryland much better for it because they know how to talk, connect, and relate to people from all different walks of life, right? And that's the other part of belonging across boundaries. Dr. Sky and I, over these next few weeks, will be reading a lot of preferencing forms from many of you, right? And one of the things we actively seek out are students who are really, really genuinely open to learning and socializing in a diverse environment. We think it's incredibly important for DCC to be over the top exclusive and be a place where everybody can be, everyone can feel welcome and can be embraced and accepted for who they are, right? Specifically, our Black students, our Brown students, our queer, Indigenous, and first generation students, and also our neurodivergent students. We make a conscious effort in our programming, in our curriculum, in our programs, policies, and values to make sure no one in DCC feels like they don't belong just because of who they are. Okay, so that's the community you might be stepping into if you feel that DCC is a great place for you. Okay, so what I'd like to do now is to start to address some questions. So I'm sure we have plenty of questions here in the room, but to give you all a chance to kind of collect yourselves and maybe kind of articulate your thoughts and questions, I want to actually pose a question to some of our DCC students here. They'll just get the ball rolling for you. And some of these questions are ones that you might already have on the tip of your tongue. So the first question I'm going to pose to our DCC students, and Dr. Sky, you can feel free to join into and answer in your own way. The first question I want to ask of our DCC students is, how did you know that DCC was the right program for you? And I don't really care who goes first. Y'all can just jump in, and if you're ready to answer, go ahead and go for it.
So I knew DCC was a good fit for me because I've always been a very creative person, but I've also really enjoyed STEM fields, and like I love science and like biology and chemistry and all of that. So I knew I wanted to major in the STEM field, but I didn't want to lose the creative aspect of myself. So DCC was a great way to mesh the two together and give me like a space to be creative while also having all my other academic classes at the same time.
Thanks, Bia. We hear that a lot, right? This notion that you have a creative self that people are aware can get stifled if you don't make time for it, if you don't kind of give it a chance, like exercise it as if it's like a muscle. Good. Anyone else?
I would love to answer this question. I definitely first started to fall in love with DCC on this call, actually, 2 years ago. And I think it was really just how like multidisciplinary majors were really celebrated. I loved the idea of getting to know people of all different walks of life and all different majors and really working collaboratively with them. As a bioengineering student, I have worked on teams of strictly engineers and worked on teams with, lots of different majors. And I find that that is just an incredibly productive and wonderful atmosphere to create great ideas when we all have different aspects that we love and different things that we bring to the table. So it was definitely the exciting prospect of all of this multidisciplinary interaction.
Thanks, Georgia. I appreciate it. Also, I'm going to just like gas Georgia up for a second. So we're doing something this year. I just saw a question in the chat too about other team bonding activities that are non-academic. So I'm sure someone else is going to help answer that and type while I'm talking. But yes, there are. And one of the things we actually launched this year is like a year-long family contest where basically all of DCC got randomly assigned into 10 different families. And like things that you do in the program, like attending events or submitting to design contests or competitions and stuff that we have, you get family points. I just want to say for all of you who you don't know Georgia, but Georgia is right now the individual point leader for the entire DCC program, okay? She has, as an individual person, more points than some entire teams of 14 people have, okay? So I just want to shout that out for a second. Georgia is one of our like DCC standout stars. She is the highest point earner on the leading family right now. The family contest closes on April 30th. And like, I just don't see a way that Georgia is not gonna like just carry this whole thing. But I just want to let y'all know, Georgia's amazing. Did anyone else want to answer this particular question? You don't have to. Okay. All right. The other question I wanted to pose to our DCC students, right? And I'm really curious to hear these answers is of the DCC classes that you have taken thus far, and it's hard, we have a couple first-year students, so they've only technically finished one DCC course so far. But of the DCC courses that you've taken so far, which has been your favorite and why?
I'm going to go and answer this one. As you guys remember, I'm a senior, so this class was so long ago for me. I'm ancient history, but I took this class when I was a freshman called The Internet of Evil. It was taught by Dr. Green from the Info Sci department. And that was the class that like introduced me to the information sciences department because I knew that I had this interest in psychology, but I also knew I had an interest in tech and like the human side of tech. How do we put biases into technology? How can this hurt or help us? So having that class was really great for me because it gave me an entry point in this major that I didn't even know existed. Like, who knows about information science? What is that? That's like the biggest thing ever. I still don't know sometimes, but I really remember that class very fondly because we just talked. Like, it was such a great discussion because everyone already knew each other. So it was just one of those nice little discussion classes where everyone participates and you just have a lot of great exchanges of ideas.
I'm so glad Christina answered this question because in addition to obviously it was a good experience. And I remember I would chat with Christina when she was in this class. And I remember her telling me how much she loved it and how much she enjoyed Dr. Green's teaching. But it is so common that because DCC brings in faculty from a bunch of different majors, right? Even though you're not an info science major, you get to take basically an info science class. And like Christina, it opens up a whole new kind of realm of possibility where now Christina added a whole second major, which is very Christina of her, okay? Adding additional majors, adding additional minors along the way. But it's because she had that exposure to info science through DCC. Like she said, she probably wouldn't have sought it out. She wouldn't have known to seek it out. And this does remind me that a lot of DCC students, I do want to say, we have a pretty high percentage of DCC students that throughout the course of DCC either add additional majors or minors or change their major outright during the course of the program. And frankly, it's something we strongly encourage because one of the most wild things about higher education in the United States is that you show up at college, 17, 18, some of you are 16 years old, and you're expected to pick a major that sets you on a life path for decades, right? And that's a really big ask at that age to make such a huge decision. Some of you might be really stressed or overwhelmed by it. And that's totally valid because it's kind of wild to ask you 16, 17, 18 years old to pick a profession for yourself. So I'm always really pleased to hear stories like Christina's or any of our students who, whether because of DCC's classes or chatting with other DCC students, realize there's other possibilities out there other than the one that you initially thought was the right fit for you. And you never know where it might take you. Does anyone else want to answer this question about DCC courses?
I will speak on one of my favorite courses as well. Last semester, I took creativity through visual communication, and I loved this class because it was just so accepting of any definition of creativity and expression. The weekly prompts that we had were fun, and they just again encouraged all sorts of wacky ideas that we then would discuss the following week. So I remember one week we had a prompt that was create a font, like a type font. But it was just using things in your daily life. And so what I took that to mean, I went and I baked some cookies and I rolled them and I shaped them into the entire alphabet, and it took a long time, and then I baked them and then they looked all crazy because they expanded and stuff. But it just was so much fun. And then, the person next to me went outside and used leaves and sticks to make the alphabet. It just, it would change your view of things because you would encounter other people's ideas that you found really inspiring. So I really loved this class because, again, it was just very open and very different from my just very STEM heavy normal workload. So it was just a period to really be fun and explore neat ideas. So I loved that class.
We've heard such great things about that class. We've offered that class now 2 fall semesters in a row as one of the 208 options. And I know the instructor who teaches that class loves teaching in DCC because she says DCC students have this level of energy and engagement that she doesn't see in her other classes. And she has as much fun teaching it as you all have taking the class. And so hopefully she'll return to us next fall. So my first year students right now, who might have just been listening to Georgia, look out for creativity through visual communication, maybe next fall, hopefully, if we're lucky. Anyone else want to answer this one? I know Bia and Kalpho, you guys haven't had as much time to take DCC courses just yet. Okay. And then the last question I wanted to pose to our group, and then we're going to kind of unleash this so that all of y'all can ask as many questions as you want, is how do you see DCC kind of either fitting into or shaping or influencing your path forward, either personally or professionally? How has DCC kind of shaped maybe your life from here on out, if anyone's prepared to kind of speak to that yet?
I can start on that question. So I'm interested in going into the dental field, but specifically, I really want to open a practice that is accessible to anyone in the health field. So specifically, in my free time, I'm learning sign language, and I also speak another language at home. And I'm interested in doing research that's related to the queer community because I want to be able to open a practice that's open to anyone, and medical and specifically oral health is accessible, and it's not hindered or made to be seen as a difficulty in someone's life. And I think specifically DCC has kind of given me a new perspective, especially in my 105 class. I learned a lot about things that I've never learned about before, but I want to kind of use what I'm learning in DCC in order to create a more diverse practice that's more accessible to people. And that's kind of how I see DCC as really beneficial to my future. And I'm also just creative in general. I'm in Dr. Liu's independent study course right now, and I'm interested in crochet because I'm also interested in sustainability. So my goal at the end of this independent study is to create a reusable crochet tote bag that I can use in grocery stores. And so that's just a little thing that I also kind of see for myself in the future. And I'm a first year student, so I still have a long way to go. But even as a first year student, I really see DCC impacting my life.
I don't know about you, Dr. Sky, but that almost made me cry. As a first year student,
I know.
I'm only a first year, but it's such a beautiful kind of perspective that you're sharing. And it's really wonderful for us to kind of just hear already how halfway through your first year, you're seeing it kind of shape things, your next steps forward, no matter how it goes. That makes us feel really proud. Thank you so much for sharing. Does anyone else want to share? Christina can tell I'm staring at her.
I guess as the senior in the room, I do have to speak up because I am currently thinking about what I'm going to do after graduation. Honestly, I don't have it figured out yet. And that's okay. Like a lot of you are going to get senior year and everyone's going to be like, I have this internship at Amazon and I have this at Google. And you're going to be like, and that's okay. Because like, I think that the value of DCC for me was like, it's such a wildly diverse cohort because everyone loves to be creative, right? You have like the engineers, the pre-med students, the CS students, and they're all just there to be creative and you get to learn from all their perspectives too. And I think that a valuable insight that I learned from being around all of these wonderful people is that I'm gonna be fine. Like I have a lot of these skills that I've learned from not only from DCC, but from college, and like the skills to be like hardworking, to be detail oriented, to have a hard work ethic. Those are going to be useful to you in your future, no matter where you go. So even if you don't have, I know it's a way off for you guys, but like, even if you don't have an idea in senior year, you're going to be okay because you're going to be building all of these skills with your DCC cohort. If you choose to come to DCC, you should, but whatever. You're going to be building those skills. So you're going to be fine in the end, no matter where you end up.
Christina is going to be perfectly fine, as well as all of you, no matter what steps you decide to take forward over the next few years. Christina and I spent quite a bit of time together in student hours, and I've gotten to know Christina really well. So if I'm confident about anything, I know that Christina is going to be more than fine. And even just a couple of weeks ago, I had the pleasure of submitting a letter of recommendation on Christina's behalf to a job application. And I got to tell them, Christina doesn't know this, I got to tell them, so I had to answer all their questions at the very end. They're like, is there anything else we should know about Christina? And I got to tell them, you could literally not find anyone better. And it was wonderful. And it was a great opportunity for me. So that's how I know Christina can be just fine. And she's right that all of you will be just fine too. Bia, Georgia, did you want to answer this one, or should we open it up to everyone for other questions? And I see that questions are happening in the chat too, so that's fine if you want to.
There's a lot. Yeah, we're doing our best.
Georgia, Bia, did you want to weigh in on this one before we open up to general Q&A?
I could have just a quick response. I think there's something so special about taking classes and living with a whole bunch of people in this program. So just to put it simply, I'm going to have wonderful, lasting friendships that I can rely on for my whole life from this program.
That's always really great to hear too. The former director of GCC, so our former director who was with us for 11 years, Dr. Jason Farman, he departed DCC last year. And he always was really fond of telling this story about how from the first year, so DCC classes are named by the Greek alphabet. So the first class was the alpha class, and they are well into their 30s now. And there is a group of 3 alpha DCC students who still live together in California. They work in Silicon Valley, and they are still roommates now, well into their 30s, and have been roommates since first year of college in DCC. And like I said, not everyone finds their best friends in DCC. It's not a guarantee, but you're pretty likely to find some pretty special people here in the program if you end up finding yourselves here. So I'm glad to hear that. Bia, did you want to say anything? You don't have to.
DCC really, so for context, when I was like applying for colleges and in the process, my senior year, I was really nervous about like which direction my life should take, because I've been dancing since I was really young. So I didn't know if I should lean into the dance creative side of my life or the academic science part of my life. And DCC really just made it clear to me that I can have both. Like I don't have to pick one over the other. I can use them both in conjunction to just like live my life. And it's honestly great. I love it.
That makes us really happy to hear too. And I'm glad, Bia, that you could give voice to kind of that level of anxiety that typically happens for most people at this time. It's a really hard, as much excitement as y'all in the room might be feeling as you get ready for college and university. It's a lot to take on. It can be very overwhelming. It can be very scary, right? And I'm really glad that Bia was brave enough to kind of give voice to that, because I have a feeling a lot of people are feeling that way. And you might think like you're the only one, and why is everyone else just so excited and ready to go? And most folks realize the gravity of like the next few months in your life. You're making huge decisions. The steps you take forward will impact all the steps after it. And so, Bia, I'm just glad that you found yourself in DCC and are willing to share that with us. Awesome. So what we're going to do now is we'd like to open up to Q&A. Like I said, I know that a lot of folks are asking their questions in the chat, and you can continue to do that Please be patient with us. We'll try to answer as many of them as we can. But as we're speaking, we sometimes can't type at the same time. All right. But if you have questions that you'd like to verbally ask, feel free to unmute. The first thing maybe is if you could actually raise your hand, just so there's a lot of people here. So I don't want us all talking over one another. So if you'll use your Zoom functions to raise your hand, and then we can kind of call on folks one at a time. So I'll kind of stop talking for a moment. Okay, go ahead, Priya. Go ahead and unmute.
Hi, I'll turn on my camera so you're not just talking to a brick here.
It's all good. You can leave it off if you want. Anyone
Hi,
can leave it off. Hi, Priya.
So I'm interested in like more technical things. I'm an engineering major right now. So I wanted to know kind of what are like the more technical classes at DCC and if this kind of fits into more like robotics and technical things.
That's actually a really good question. And about 10 years ago, I would have been answering it very, very differently. So when DCC first started, the huge focus was on technical training, right? It was very heavily STEM. And over the past 10 years, there's been kind of a gentle but steady evolution where most of our curriculum has shifted away from training technical skills, particularly with regards to computer science and engineering, right? So we don't have classes in programming. We don't have courses that will prepare you for mechanical engineering or robotics. That is not part of our curriculum. So a lot of our students who do come from those majors rely on their majors to give them that training, and they bring that into conversation with the dominant curriculum in creativity and design that they find in DCC. So you won't find those technical skills necessarily being trained in the program, but we hope that the curriculum you get in human culture, in fundamentals of design, of different ways and perspectives of thinking about design in the world beyond your major will actually help you become a better engineer, and at the same time open up other doors for you and maybe awaken other parts of yourself that are just as important as the parts of yourself that you're training in engineering. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Thank you.
No problem. Who's next? If you'd like to raise your hand, go ahead. I'm actually going to address some of the questions too I see in the chat. So as I'm talking, if you think of a question, feel free to raise your hand. Someone just recently asked, and Dr. Sky and Christina are both answering this here. Someone asked about study abroad or doing an internship. Does it have to be a summer program, right? And they were right to answer, absolutely, it does not. I want to just offer a little bit of expansion here because sometimes this is confusing for folks. So when I said on a previous slide that 3 credits in your DCC curriculum could come from independent study, study abroad, internship, or an advanced 300 or 400 level course, we give you that flexibility because we in DCC believe that a central part of the curriculum should actually be sending you back out into the university or out into other parts of the world to learn more, because we know that we can't, kind of actually related to Priya's question, we can't give you all the training you will need or all the training you even want. We can only do so much, right? So we build that into the curriculum to basically force you to also pursue an internship or pursue a study abroad or take on an independent study or seek out 300 or 400 level classes elsewhere at the university that will ultimately extend your DCC education. So when it comes to internships and study abroad, you can find any academic internship. As long as you can get academic credit for it, it will be applicable for DCC. And most departments on campus have an internship course that you would enroll in, and basically you double dip. So if you get an internship course in your major, we also count it for DCC. If you take a study abroad somewhere, it could be during a winter break, which is typically quite short. It's usually a 3-week study abroad. You could do it during the fall, you could do it on the spring, or you could do it in the summer. As long as you take a study abroad program that again is in some way affiliated with the university, well, you'll get credit for it. We double dip that too and count it for DCC. If you do take a study abroad during fall or spring, you would probably take it during your junior or senior year if you don't want to interrupt your DCC sequence of classes. And that's totally fine. We have plenty of students that wait until their junior year, technically after they're done their DCC courses, to take a study abroad and like finish up their DCC curriculum. And I'll just say in general, this is not related to DCC specifically, but if you have the financial means and the logistical availability to do a study abroad during college or university, you 1000% should. It's a huge opportunity that you unlikely to get later in life. You might think, oh yeah, I can take off a few months and go traveling around the world. Once you start working, once you start having other adult responsibilities, it's actually very difficult to find uninterrupted time like that to go traveling. So if you can work it in during your 4 years in university, you absolutely should. It's my biggest regret from my time at Villanova that I did not study abroad. Other questions? Does someone want to raise their hand or? And I know we're still answering questions in the chat as well. I'm scrolling back too to see if there's ones we haven't answered yet.
I can ask this one on someone's behalf because I think it
Okay.
would be kind of interesting to hear the responses.
Great.
What do internships and employers look for in DCC students? What specifically sets them apart from other students?
I bet my DCC students now in the room are like, yes, tell us. Guy, I'm sure you have an answer for this as well, but I can also start by saying, and I'm answering from the perspective of having written many letters of recommendation for DCC students over the past 3 years. Okay. And one of the things I'm able to say about pretty much all the DCC students that I write letters for is that you have the ability to think across intellectual boundaries, which is not a given. You'd be shocked at how many students I've encountered in 12 years that because they're trained in computer science, only think in terms of computer science, right? Or students who are history majors, so they actually find it only possible to think in like very historical kind of logic terms, right? And I used to be, my PhD is in communication, right? And there's a lot of communication students who can only see things in terms of human communication, right? DCC students, because of the coursework and because of the social environment, are able to ultimately speak languages from different disciplines. And what I mean by that is that every different academic major or academic discipline has its own vocabulary, has its own certain methods or skills used to do things, its own systems of logic, of understanding, of constructing reasoning, of constructing arguments, right? And most people who only stay in their major end up only thinking in that one way that they've been trained to think. DCC students aren't like that. And jobs and employers are absolutely obsessed with the notion of a person, of an employee, of a worker who can actually be conversant across a lot of different groups and can think from a multiplicity of different perspectives, not just from one very narrow vantage point. The other thing I always get to say about DCC students is that socially, right, they are leaps and bounds like kind of ahead of other students, again, in being able to connect with on a genuine and like caring way about other human beings, which again is not a given. It feels kind of weird to say, but in 12 years at the University of Maryland, like the overwhelming number of students like are not like, they don't routinely think of others in a very genuine or thoughtful way, right? Unless you're forced to, unless you're around folks who are from different backgrounds, who open up your mind to different things, right? Again, it's not only crossing intellectual boundaries, but social and cultural boundaries as well. And that is another thing that employers really, really look for. And then the last thing is this, DCC students, because by the end of their sophomore year, they have the capstone experience, I always get to talk about how they can function very, very well autonomously and with very minimal supervision and see a project from start to finish. That is, for like, from an employer's perspective, music to their ears, to think that they can hire you, give you some training, and then leave you to it, and you'll get things done, and you won't need to constantly be checked on. You won't need to be micromanaged. You understand how to tackle a problem, solve it, right, and execute on your own because you've had that practice from the first day you step into DCC. Dr. Sky, did you want to add anything about the DCC student strengths?
Yeah, I wrote a couple of words down and then I went back trying to answer some of these questions. So I wrote down very much what Dr. Liu was saying in terms of people being really, really well-rounded. I think that that's really important. I also come from a home state where they kind of don't really value electives or art classes or anything like that. They kind of want people to be more one-track minded in terms of education. So it's been really nice to see that the students here are very well-rounded. They're very motivated. It's nice to see students in the maker space just figure something out, you know, kind of go in and say, I don't really know about crocheting, but let's learn, or I've never 3D printed before, but will you show me? So they feel comfortable with complexity, and I love their motivation and willingness to learn things outside of their comfort zone. And I'm trying to be more like them in that realm. If I don't know how to do it, sometimes, you know, I have the mental blocks of, I don't know, but they just really dive right in and try to figure it out and help each other figure it out, which is really beautiful to see. Lots of transferable skills.
This is such a good question, because some of you might be hearing like us answer, be like, yeah, that's me. That's great. I feel like I fit in. I feel like I belong here. And then some of you might be like, that's not me yet. But DCC can really give you the opportunities to kind of cultivate these things in yourself. And these are things that employers do look for. Of course, you're smart. They see your GPA, they see your transcripts, they know that you don't want college. They want to know how you interact with others. They want to know how you approach problems, and they want to know like what your motivation is as a human being, right? And whether or not that motivation aligns with the kind of work they do. I see a hand from Samuel.
Yeah, so I wanted to ask, how does the extra coursework that's involved with this honors program, how does that interact with the ability to do a double major or other things that are going to take a lot of credits within the overall university? Can you speak a little on that?
That's a great question. The first thing I'm going to do is put it to my students. Do any of the students want to talk about like the firsthand experience of incorporating DCC in with your other classes for your majors? Go ahead, Bia.
So I am a double major, and I will say that the DCC coursework, it's not like overwhelming in like the slightest. For the most part, we have a lot of flexibility with like how long we have to turn things in. And even I remember last semester in 105, when we were submitting our final projects, we didn't have to submit a perfect final version of our project. We had a week from after we submitted something, like anything. It could have just been like the first draft. We had a week from then to refine our work and then turn it in again and resubmit it. So it gives a lot of comfort, because you don't really have to stress too much about like, oh my gosh, I have a project due on Sunday and it's Saturday already and I don't know what to do. Like there's a lot of, and even in like what the projects are, for the most part, they're like, you get to pick what the project is, or there's different options of what it is. Like if you are a very visual person, you can transform the prompt of the project into something visual, or even like writing, or really anything. So it slots in with the other classes pretty well.
That's part of something we really strive to do in DCC. You might find on our website, we have, there's a tab that says how we teach. It has our teaching philosophy on there. And some of what Bia said speaks to that, like the flexibility in the formats of the assignments that encourage you to be creative in your own unique way, revision policies that allow you to experiment and not necessarily just aim for perfection and accuracy. And I think Bia really speaks to how some of that teaching philosophy in the program helps you kind of manage your coursework in DCC alongside your other coursework. Georgia, Christina, especially you all are kind of later on as well. Do either of you want to speak to anything? I mean, Christina also, you know, double majors really for a lot of folks here. How like actually just fitting all the courses into your 4-year plan works? Has DCC posed a problem for you there? Go ahead, Christina.
Yeah, I don't think that DCC really put any kind of strain on my 4-year plan. As Jessica said, the classes they fulfill some of the gen ed requirements. So you'd have to go out and find fun classes to do anyway to fulfill those requirements, but you can just do them in DCC, so it doesn't really affect you there. And for perspective reasons, I think that DCC is basically just comparable to like a minor, like credit-wise. I think it's 13 credits. Jessica
16.
checking her math.
Sorry. I was just checking the time. It's 16 total. Yeah.
16. Yeah, I think that's like about the amount of credits that my neuroscience minor might need. I think neuroscience might be like 19, and it's like a more technical, like heavy sciencey kind of minor. So yeah, it's like not that much in the grand scheme of the 4-year plan. Plus, you can basically count on being done in like 2 years, maybe 3, if you choose to do your study abroad or internship or what have you, like as a junior or something like that. So yeah, I think it really complements like coursework, especially like more STEM heavy coursework pretty well.
Awesome. Thanks, Christina. I hope we answered your question, Samuel. Great. I think we have time for another, like one question, and then we'll kind of wrap things up as we get closer here to 8 o'clock.
So you guys were saying that it's like a 2-year program.
Yes.
Do you finish it before you graduate?
Absolutely. Yes. So most DCC students are actually done by the end of their sophomore year. And like Christina said, that frees you up in junior and senior year to pursue all other sorts of things, other activities, more extracurriculars, additional minors or majors, right? But most of our students are, so our actual coursework is your freshman and sophomore year. The only students who would extend after their sophomore year are waiting to finish up those final 3 credits, like with a study abroad or an internship or something like that. But most of our students are completely done and become DCC alumni by the start of their junior year.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, of course. All right, so as we get close here to 8 o'clock, I am going to kind of put a different slide here on your screen. There's a few, so some of you are probably familiar with our website already. If you've already checked us out, it's dcc.umd.edu. And I want to point your attention to a few specific pages. If you go to the mission page, /mission, right? That is where you can kind of get the overview of what the DCC program is if you just want a refresher later on. If you go to the about/admissions page, there's an admissions tab. You can learn more about, we have a series of questions on there that if you ask yourself those questions, you might get a better sense of whether or not DCC is the right fit for you. And then finally, we have an FAQs page. You can click the button in the upper right-hand corner of the website, and that might answer some of your questions as well. If you're still considering DCC or you want to know more about the program or want to reach out to us, our Instagram is UMD_DCC. Feel free to follow us and kind of see what we're up to. And then you can also email us at dcc-honors@umd.edu. We know the preferencing period can be a little stressful. You know, you've got 8 programs to look at. You're trying to rank them in some sort of order that might make sense, right? And so we know that it can be a tough time. If you need any help at all making these decisions, we're available to chat. When I say we, I mean Dr. Sky and I. Our DCC students are going to go back to living their wonderful lives and studying for classes and doing everything that they got to do. But Dr. Sky and I are here to help you with anything you need as you try to make these decisions. And we're happy to answer any other questions that arise as you fill out your preferencing forms. Okay. So I'm going to take one last look at the chat. I think we answered that one. Just want to say thank you all so much.